Welcome back, everyone, to our third and final segment of today's Getting In a College Coach Conversation. I'm excited to welcome my colleague and former financial aid officer at Southern New Hampshire University, Alex Bickford, to the show. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How's your summer? Good
Summer's
so far?
been great. Busy.
All right,
Yeah,
that's good. Busy's good. You and I are here in the wilds of New England, and we have to get out and enjoy the nice weather while we have it.
Yeah, finally,
So,
some nice
yeah,
weather.
exactly. A lot of rain. All right, well, so today we are talking about the perks of on-campus jobs. We've done a bunch of segments on financial aid, borrowing money, working while you're in school. And this one particularly, we're going to focus on those jobs that are right there on campus. And my first question for you is, when I hear the term on-campus jobs, I often think work study.
Sure.
But in your mind, are we talking exclusively work study, or are there other options to work on campus?
Yeah, so not necessarily just work study on campus. So there are several departments on campus that will hire students who are not specifically work study students. So work study students typically have a level of financial need determined by the federal financial aid form, the FAFSA, and the university will award a certain dollar amount of work study dollars
Right.
that the student earns kind of like an hourly rate over the course of the year. So you may make up to that, but you may make less than that. But there are often times that students actually might have a low amount of work study or no eligibility for work study, but still want to work on campus. So there will be departments that will hire campus payroll students or convert work study students who have maximized their work study earnings for the year into campus payroll students.
And actually, that's an interesting comment that you just made. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, clearly there are differences between a work study student and a campus payroll. Tell me a little bit more about that, like maxing out. Does that mean there's a limit to how much you can earn, actually?
There oftentimes is a limit to how much you can earn. It might be $1,000, it might be $3,000. Some of it will depend on your eligibility for work study. So if you do max out and you still have some time left in the semester and your department wants to keep you on, they oftentimes will have in their budgets money set aside for hiring student workers. The benefit the departments have of work study students is they're paying half of the hourly rate.
Oh, yeah.
And the federal government is paying half of the hourly rate. So they get twice as much work study students, essentially, as they would a campus payroll student. But for somebody who's certainly demonstrated that they have a good work kind of ethic, they'll oftentimes convert them to on-campus payroll, which it's a simple sort of process if they have the money in the budget.
Right. It's the key being having the money in the budget, right? And so I think the bottom line message here is that if you don't have work study, that doesn't mean you can't work on campus. And I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Right.
The library, certainly the dining hall, athletic facilities are oftentimes, tutoring facilities are oftentimes looking for students regardless of whether it's work study or campus payroll.
I mean, there are truly, you name it, and there's a job on campus. And I know this because my son's job on campus last year, not a work study job, was loading the trucks that go around and load the vending machines on campus. Who knew that was a job?
Who knew? You would have thought that would have been an outside vendor.
You would think, but apparently it's not. It's run by the university, and he goes to the place where they load the trucks, and he loves it because he's into working out and stuff like that. So he lifts heavy things, and
great.
Awesome. Great. It's awesome for him. So so truly you could do many, many different things. What do you think about, I think it's probably pretty clear based on what I just said of my own son working is, a lot of parents feel strongly that they would like their student to just focus on academics. But what do you think about impact of having an on-campus job on a student's academic outcome?
Sure. It was certainly heavily dependent on the student. I'll cast kind of a general net here that the studies show that students who work up to 15 hours a week on campus through either work study or campus payroll actually have better academic outcomes on average, higher GPAs, better retention rates, so more connection with the school, more
Yeah.
likely to stay and re-enroll in future years. Better time management skills, more likely to graduate on time. So those are some of the just academic benefits that come with on-campus work.
Yeah. I think this is an idea too that's in some cases kind of carrying over from high school, where parents feel like, it feels sometimes like so few teenagers these days work. I don't actually believe that's true. I think there are
Right.
probably plenty of teenagers out there working. However, many, many, many parents are saying your job is school,
Right.
and that's it. And I actually think that can be a negative. Again, personal bias here.
Right.
My son worked while he was in high school, and he works while he's in college. I worked when I was in college. I only worked summers when I was in high school. My personal experience was that I was, busy, and therefore I had to do this
Budget
project.
your time.
I had to
Right.
budget my time. The biggest transition challenge that many students have when they go off to college is, instead of having their whole week completely scheduled for them, right? So they have class, they have to be in school like 7, 8 o'clock. They're there until 2, 3, 4 o'clock. Then they have after school activities. You get to college, and if you're not playing a sport, what do you have, like
Right.
5 classes maybe that actually meet over the course of a week, and then the rest of the time is yours to do with as you please, and that is not always a great thing.
And I always like the line, and I think it works in science as well as in human life, is that things that stay in action tend to stay in, things in action tend to stay in action.
Yes.
You get into your dorm room and you sit there and you're binging a show or you're hanging out with friends. It's sometimes difficult to say, I'm going to get up and I'm going to start doing my homework, or I'm going to study, or I'm going to do that project that I need to do. Whereas if you go and then you go to your on-campus job and then you go home and get dinner and then you do your work, it's a little bit more regimented. And you'll certainly have plenty at 15 hours a week. You'll certainly have plenty of time to hang out with friends and do some of that stuff, especially because your job is right where, right here.
Right, exactly. But one thing that you just said too made me think, right? You could go back to your dorm and you can binge watch a show. Maybe you're hanging out with friends. Maybe you haven't made many friends yet, right? That's something that we hear a lot about, is students just sitting in their rooms. They're on their phones. They're on social media. They're not out meeting people. A job requires you to leave your room and introduces you to people that you wouldn't have met. Right?
It does. I think that, and speaking from personal experience, when I had work study or campus payroll jobs, and I had both, and I had a lot of jobs, I was working 2 or 3 jobs typically on campus. It had a lot of other adults that cared about your outcome. I always said, I worked in financial aid, no surprise there, but
right.
I had 5 moms that cared about, how I was doing. Was I getting to class on time? Was I eating okay? And sort of little things like that you don't necessarily get if you're working off campus, maybe, or if you're not working at all.
Right.
And then the interaction you have with students who are coming in and out of that area, or students you're working with, or even just walking to a different area of campus and seeing a different face, gives you the opportunity to meet people that you otherwise certainly wouldn't have.
Right, right. And, some students get really lucky and their roommate becomes their best friend.
Sure.
And, other students, not so much. They and their roommate, they don't get along, or they're just really different people. Maybe they haven't found anyone on their dorm floor. It gets you on a different schedule. It gets you out of your room. I don't think we could overstress the value of having a part-time job. And it doesn't even have to be 15 hours. Maybe it's a, 1 day a week thing for 5 hours. There are all different types of jobs on campus. So I think it's very beneficial. And I do particularly like the on-campus piece of it. One of the challenges I think with an off-campus job is if you don't have transportation, it can make it difficult, right, to get there. Whereas on campus, theoretically, should make it easier. I know there are big campuses where it might be hard to get from one part to another, but usually there's a system to get you there. There's a bus you can hop on or something.
And something else that I'll say just about working off campus, maybe two things. One would be your off campus job. If you're working at a restaurant as a server or whatever, they don't care if you have winter break.
Yeah.
They may not care that you're leaving for the summer. That job may not be there for you when you come back. Whereas your on-campus payroll job or your work study job oftentimes will be there for you when you come back if you want it again.
Right.
So that would be one thing. And then the other piece would be the security of an on-campus job. You're not worried about coming back late at night and finding a parking spot that's probably far from your dorm room and having to navigate your way back. You're not worried about, just like you said, the driving aspect of it. If you're on campus, there are ways to get back and forth, even if it is a large campus, from a completely the other side. So there's a security, I think, aspect of it too.
Right, right. And really quickly, because you have a really great personal story about an on-campus job, I want to point out that on-campus jobs can lead to larger careers, right? So case in point, Alex, how
Absolutely.
did you? Yeah.
So I think I worked in the athletic center. I worked as a tutor. I worked as an RA. I worked in admissions. I worked in residence hall. But I also, one summer, decided to stay on campus. And I got hired to do filing in the work study as a work study position in financial aid. And they soon learned that either I didn't have the mental focus to file or I didn't know the alphabet. I'm not sure exactly what the problem was there, but filing was not my gig. So I was answering phones. And I happened to know a little bit about financial aid because my father did not do the forms. I did the forms and sort of had a history with the financial aid office. I needed to call them often. So I was able to answer some basic questions, which led to them saying, hey, do you want to stay on and get your graduate degree and work for us? And hey, do you want to come on full time with us and work as a professional? And so I certainly wouldn't be here if I didn't work as in a work study job.
Right, right.
And that's true with 90% of, I think, financial aid people, and probably the same with 90% of admissions folks.
I think, yeah, it was not my path to admissions, but certainly a very popular path is student tour guide. Then you get a job as maybe a student worker in the admissions office, and then you actually get hired. There are many, many admissions offices hire recent grads to do that work. It's a perfect fit. You know, you're young, you want to travel,
right.
You know, you're excited about your alma mater. So yeah, absolutely that. I can think of other students. I can think of someone, a personal friend of mine who had a work study position in a research lab, had developed an interest in the research that they were doing, and it kind of dovetailed with her major. So then switched into a research position and ended up going to graduate school. She got to know the professors so well. They were huge supporters of hers, but it started out as a work study role, not just stepping right into doing research. So yeah.
And it's not always jobs within higher education. I think this could have been a case in point where she could have easily transitioned out into the medical world or into the science world outside of that. So these skills that you're learning definitely are resume builders and carryovers into your professional life, be it in education or outside of education.
Right, right. I think we need to get away from the idea that the only valuable experience is an internship, which is a word everybody loves to toss around these days, or that somehow a professional experience is less than. I mean, because it was just a work study position or you just worked in the dining hall. As I've said many times about some of the jobs I had before I launched my professional career, I learned a lot about what I didn't want in a job, you know, and that's valuable too, right?
And it's also just building that work ethic and working and having a purpose, and that purpose may not be your purpose in life, but it sort of helps keep you going. And then, as you said, finding that next thing that is your purpose.
That is exciting. Yes. On that note, Alex, thank you as always for joining the show. We always have nice conversations and I appreciate it.
It's good seeing you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, next week thanks to all my guests who joined today. Next week, I'm going to be back hosting. We're going to be doing 2 segments on the research university. So today we talked about the small liberal arts college. Next week, we're going to be covering the research university. We're also going to be we're going to do another in our in our segments or our series on personal finance. And we're going to be talking about competing financial priorities for students and parents through high school and college. So I think that's going to be a really interesting one. I'm excited to learn more. Don't forget, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more we get, the easier it is for others to find us. If you listen to the questions we were answering today and thought, I have questions, I would love to hear them answered on the podcast. You can send them to us at Facebook. You can send them to us on Instagram at collegecoachbh. You can email them to us, gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. So it's all one word, gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. And check out our blog.getintocollege.com. And don't forget, we are here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific.